In this video, we're going to look at some of the advanced features of the Arduino IDE. If you are just focused on getting started with the Arduino IDE, you should take a look at our basic Arduino IDE video. Otherwise, let's get started. So first, we're going to go back to that Preferences. Under Windows, it's File Preferences. On your Mac, it's Arduino Preferences. The sketchbook location is the default location for your sketchbook. Usually this is in some form of documents, Arduino, and in this folder you can put your basic sketches, your libraries, and additional hardware folders. This will allow you to change the place of this folder if you don't like where it is already. You've got your language editor and font size changes you can make here. That'll affect the main editor in your Arduino environment. Now here you've got show verbose output during compilation and upload. So verbose output during compilation means that whenever we hit this compile button, the verify button, we're going to get lots of information here. And this is actually every line of code that the Arduino IDE is processing to get our compiled export from our sketch. This can also be handy because you'll see all sorts of different commands and different output data from the Geekduino. You'll notice in our preferences there was also show verbose output during upload. So while we upload, we're going to see all the commands that are run to get the data to the Geekduino. We also see this, which is pretty cool. We've got all sorts of different information on the processor, the speed it's running at. We even get these sort of status updates when it's reading, writing, and rereading the data. Having these both set can be really handy while debugging. Sometimes the errors here will be much more useful if you've got the verbose output. One thing is that you always want to make sure that you read whatever's in the red error section. Sometimes this top black message can be a little bit misleading when you have the verbose output set. Here for compiler warnings, you can set different levels for your warnings. So warnings are issues with your code that aren't necessarily fatal. They're not going to stop you from compiling. So you can have the default, more, or all. Again, this can be handy when you're trying to make your code up to spec and as efficient as possible. So we've already looked at displayed line numbers in our other video. That's where you add the line numbers for each line of code. Really handy when debugging and going through multiple lines of code. We've also looked at enable code folding, which allows us to close up these brackets and clean everything up really quick. Verify code after upload. Verify code after upload is set by default, and we recommend that you keep it there. It does take a little bit more time for the programming process because you're not only sending data to the Geekduino to get written, but you're reading it back. But this is really crucial for making sure that there were no problems in the uploading process. Using an external editor can be really handy if you've got a preferred editor that you want to use in the Arduino environment. So let's take a look at how to use it. I'm going to check Use External Editor. So you'll notice that all of this is grayed out now. I can highlight it, but I can't actually edit it. Next, we're going to open up a text editor. For this example, I'm going to use Sublime Text, but any text editor we'll use, Notepad++, TextEdit, Text Wrangler, whatever you like to use. From here, you're going to open the Arduino file for your sketch. So in my case, I saved it on the desktop, got my February 29G, and this .ini file is what I want to open. You'll see here that the code is exactly what I saw in the Arduino IDE. Now if I change something here, save it, and go back to my IDE, you'll see it pop up right away. Even if I put a bunch of junk, save it, I've got my data there, and if I delete everything and save it, it goes right there. So the basic idea is that I would do all of my editing in my external program, and I would just use this Arduino IDE to upload to the board. There are other ways to integrate external editors into the Arduino IDE so that you don't have to go back and forth between programs, but that is on a per editor basis. So you're going to have to look up some more information on that based on which editor you like to use. Back to our preferences, let's go ahead and undo use external editor. Check updates for updates and startup is just what it sounds like. The Arduino IDE will look for new updates for the program itself as well as for libraries that you've downloaded through the manager. Update sketch files is something that you probably won't need unless you're working with really old code. The Arduino environment used to use the PDE extension instead of INO. We've talked about save when uploading, verifying or uploading. That will just automatically save whenever you click the verify or upload buttons. This space will allow us to add URLs for different boards. The RobotGeek system doesn't use any additional boards at the moment, but if you're using some certain board that you need expansion that's not in the default Arduino environment, you might need to add a URL here. Finally, down here you've got a text file that has all of the preferences for the Arduino IDE. Click on it and you'll see the file. You can just open it if you want to see. And this has a lot of nitty-gritty information on what's going on with the Arduino IDE. So for the most part you shouldn't need to deal much with this, but can be handy if you're having issues with the IDE. And there are a couple of things that you can't get to otherwise that you need to go through the text editor. But like I said, it's some pretty advanced stuff. One thing is to make sure don't save this while you're running the IDE. If you want to edit this, make sure to quit out of the IDE before you save anything. Let's take a look back at our menu. So just like we've got new, open, and save here, we also have new, open, save, and we also have save as. So save as will just let you change the name of your sketch, saving a copy. Save just saves the current sketch. Close will close your sketch window. If you're not saved, it will prompt you if you'd like to save before you close it. This open will let you bring up your file browser and you can open up any file anywhere on your computer. Whereas open recent will just look at any different sketches that you've recently opened. Sketchbook and examples give you quick access to all of the files in your Arduino folder for sketchbooks, like our RobotGeek sketches. Examples to the examples menu. This is not only the built-in examples from Arduino, but also the libraries, also the examples from libraries. So you've got your examples of everything built in Arduino, like Servo, and then custom libraries, like the ones you've installed for the Geekduino. The edit menu is all about the Arduino code editor. So you've got your normal undo, redo, cut and copy. You've also got copy for form and copy as HTML. These can be really handy for online forums or if you want to put code into your blog. You've got your obvious paste from your cut and copy. You select all to see everything. You can also go to line, which can be handy when you've got massive amounts of code and you want to quickly jump to a line. So even if I'm all the way at the bottom, I can still go to line 1. Just jump right up there. We'll talk more about comments later, but the basic idea is that comments are notes to yourself or to other programmers about how the code is working. So if I make a note to myself, remember that the Arduino compiler doesn't understand this. It doesn't know what that means, and in the code world this really doesn't mean anything. But I can select this, comment, uncomment. I'll automatically turn this into a comment. When I compile this, the compiler will ignore any comments. So everything compiles nicely. If I want, I can select this line, uncomment it. I can even have multiple lines and comment them. If I do have, I can increase and decrease my indentation. This makes it really handy for cleaning up large swaths of code. Arduino is a nice find editor. So let's go to find. We can always use Apple F or Command F to bring that straight up. In here we can put note, and we'll find each instance. This can be really handy for find next and previous with these key commands, so I can just, with the keys, easily find different pieces of data. Back to find, we can also do a replace. So if I put comment here, I can replace just the one I found. I can do a replace and find, which will replace this and find the next one. Or I can replace all, just instantaneously replace all the instances. I can ignore case, so for example, if I change this to comment with a capital C, try to find, it'll still find comments, but here it won't. And then wraparound is what allows me to keep going throughout the code, but if I take that out, it'll stop at the end. We'll talk a little bit more about tabs, but this will allow you to search across multiple tabs and entries. For Sketch, you've got your main, verify, and upload along with their key commands. You've also got upload using programmer. So if you've got external ISP programmer, like an AVR ISP, an STK500, you can use this command to program up to the Geekduino using the ISP port. For most of the Geekduino stuff, we're never going to use this, but this can be handy if you're getting more involved in the Arduino environment. Now, I've talked a little bit about verifying and compiling before. When we verify, when we verify, the compiler will put together a file. So if we look over here, we'll see this sketch feb29.ino.hex. And that's the file that gets uploaded to the Geekduino. There might be a certain circumstance where you would want this file to send to someone. Perhaps you'd want to let them upload something without giving them access to the source code, or you just need to analyze the hex file. Under Sketch, Export Compiled Binary, it's going to compile the sketch and then put that hex file in a place that you can find it. In this case, on the desktop is where I saved my INO file, and here we can see a normal hex file that's just the hex file that gets uploaded, as well as a hex file with the bootloader. These files then are usually used with other programs like AVR Studio to just straight load data up onto a Geekduino or Arduino board. Show Sketch Folder is a handy way to automatically open up that sketch folder I just showed you. Under Sketch, we've also got Include Library, where we can easily manage libraries, add zip libraries, as well as import libraries into our code. So let's say I wanted to add the servo library. Here it'll automatically include the servo code for me. Add File will allow you to add tabs into your main program. So here's another sketch. It's a RobotGeek 101 sketch, but when I add it here, it adds it as another tab. When I show my sketch folder, I'll see that file in there as well. For tools, auto format and fix encoding and reload can be some handy tools if you're grabbing code from the internet, and it might be a good way to reorganize and just check that all the code is valid. Archive sketch is a handy way to zip and archive a sketch so that if you want to send it to someone else. So we'll go ahead and archive, and we can pick where we want to archive it, and we'll just save it as a zip file. It'll then save any contents of the sketch. Serial monitor is just a quick way to get to that serial monitor button we have over here. Serial plotter is a new tool. It's a pretty cool tool, and we're not going to go in depth here, but you can actually receive data from the Geekduino and then plot it. So for example, if you wanted to plot temperature, force, any data coming in from the Arduino. In our other video, we've talked about board. We'll also see the board's manager here. This allows us to add different boards. So for example, by default, if we wanted to add some of the Intel boards like the Galileo or the Edison, We can also, in our preferences, add URLs so that we'll see all sorts of different boards here. For the Geekduino, we've got the Duemilanove or DS1000, but you can also pick your board from any of the default Arduino boards. If your board has different processor types, here's where you'll pick that processor. Picking the wrong processor means that you won't be able to upload to your Geekduino properly. Then you've got your port, that's a serial port associated with your Geekduino. This programmer refers to that upload with programmer that I was talking about before. So this is if you're using external hardware. Like I mentioned, the AVR ISP, the STK500. If you don't see your board's information here, you might need to install some additional files so that you can program with that board. Here we've got burn bootloader. And burn bootloader is an operation that will take a bootloader and put it on the Geekduino. By default, the Geekduino programs over its serial port, and that's facilitated by the bootloader. The bootloader is a tiny program that lives on the Geekduino's Atmega 328 chip, and it stays there no matter what. Whenever you start uploading via serial, the bootloader sort of wakes up and then writes the program that you're sending to the main flash chip on the Atmega 328. This is a really clever way to make it so you don't need external programming like the ISP, AVR ISP. The kick is that the bootloader can only be put onto the Geekduino via one of these ISP programmers. Your Geekduino already comes with a bootloader, but if you want to change the bootloader or you need to reload the bootloader, you'll need some external hardware like the ISP programmer, and then you'll use this burn bootloader command. Burn bootloader will pick the bootloader based on the board you have picked. This port will have to be associated with your programmer, and then it'll go ahead and load the new bootloader up onto your sketch. It'll then burn the bootloader onto your Geekduino. Now you notice when we added a new file, we added a tab here. So these tabs represents files within our sketch folder. We can easily add new ones. We can rename them. Delete them. And navigate them by selecting each one or going previous, next. Having multiple files can be handy for organizing all of your different code, especially when you have really complicated code. We'll take a look at examples, ARMLink, Snapper ARMLink serial. Here you'll see a sketch with 4 different files. Each one is a tab. And we've got different programs running on each tab, whereas the main one can call the different files, like this input control.h, and get access to all of this data. So again, this is really handy when you've got really big sketches. You need to organize them. That's it for this video. We recommend that you take a look at some of our other Geekduino videos as well as our RobotGeek 101 videos to get started with programming.